My brother broke my wheelchair, which cost $5,000, calling it a joke. I sued him, and the whole family was angry at me. But when we got to court, I said, "Hi Reddit. I need advice because I'm losing my mind over what happened recently. I'm David, 28 years old, and I've been paralyzed from the waist down since an accident 6 years ago. My wheelchair isn't just a regular wheelchair. It's custom-made to suit my specific needs. It cost $5,000, which I managed to afford thanks to savings, help from my parents, and a community fundraiser. Without it, I'm completely stuck." This past weekend, my family had a gathering at my parents' house. It was one of those semi-regular get-togethers where everyone shows up with food, catches up on life, and deals with the family drama that inevitably bubbles up. My family is full of big personalities, but the one person who always manages to stir up trouble is my cousin Jack. Jack is 32, and he loves being the funny guy of the family. He's the type who thrives on attention, pulling pranks and cracking jokes at other people's expense. Jack doesn't know when to stop, and he's terrible at taking responsibility when he crosses the line. Most of the time, people just let him get away with his antics because it's easier than calling him out. Unfortunately, this time his antics went way too far. We were all hanging out in the backyard, eating barbecue and catching up. My wheelchair was parked next to me as I sat at the outdoor table, chatting with some family members. Jack was in full performance mode, juggling random items and making dumb jokes. At one point, he turned his attention to me. I could tell by the way he looked at my wheelchair that he was about to do something stupid. "David, I bet I could do some awesome tricks with your ride," he said, grinning. "Jack, don't," I said immediately. "Seriously, don't touch it." Of course, Jack didn't listen. He took my wheelchair without asking and started rolling it around the yard, laughing like a maniac. My heart sank. This wasn't just a random object. It was something I relied on to live my life. I yelled at him to stop, but he acted like I was overreacting. "Relax, man. I'm just having fun," he shouted. Jack picked up speed, pushing the wheelchair faster and faster across the yard. I watched helplessly as he started trying to show off, pretending to be some kind of daredevil. My family, caught up in their conversations, didn't notice what was happening. I kept shouting at him to put the wheelchair down, but he ignored me, laughing louder with every second. Then it happened. Jack attempted some ridiculous stunt, trying to jump onto the wheelchair like a skateboard. Instead of looking cool, he lost his balance, and the wheelchair crashed onto the concrete patio with a loud bang. One of the wheels bent completely out of shape, and part of the frame cracked. The laughter stopped. Everyone turned to look, and I felt a lump in my throat as I stared at the wreckage. My custom $5,000 wheelchair was ruined. I couldn't even process it for a moment. I was too shocked. Jack, on the other hand, tried to play it off. Whoops," he said, scratching the back of his head. "It's not that bad, right?" I snapped. "Not that bad? Jack, do you have any idea what you've done? That's my wheelchair. I can't just replace it. It's custom-made." Instead of apologizing, Jack doubled down. "Oh, come on, David. It's just a chair. Don't be so dramatic." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just a chair. It was my mobility, my independence, my freedom. I told Jack he needed to pay for the damage, but he laughed in my face. "Pay? For what? It was just a joke. Don't take everything so seriously." The rest of the family finally chimed in. My mom was horrified and started scolding Jack, while my dad tried to calm me down. Some of my other relatives stayed quiet, clearly not wanting to take sides. Jack just stood there, refusing to take responsibility and acting like I was overreacting. Now I'm stuck with a destroyed wheelchair and no way to fix it. Jack refuses to pay, and my parents are trying to mediate, but I'm furious. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's my entire life that's been upended because of Jack's stupidity. I don't know what to do. Should I take him to small claims court? Should I cut him off completely? I'm at a loss here, Reddit. How do I make him understand the gravity of what he's done? And how do I get my wheelchair fixed without going broke? Any advice would be appreciated. Hey Reddit, I'm back with an update, and things have gotten even more complicated. After my cousin Jack destroyed my $5,000 custom wheelchair and refused to take responsibility, I decided to take legal action. It wasn't an easy decision, but I had no other choice. Jack's refusal to pay left me with no way to replace my wheelchair, and I couldn't let him walk away without consequences. Here's everything that's happened since then. I contacted my lawyer, Sarah, who has been a close friend since college. When I explained the situation, she reassured me that I had a solid case. "You're not being unreasonable, David," she said. "You've suffered financial harm, and Jack needs to be held accountable. If he won't pay voluntarily, a lawsuit is the next step." Even though Sarah's confidence gave me a boost, I couldn't shake the guilt of suing a family member. But every time I thought about how Jack laughed off his actions and dismissed the damage, my anger outweighed my hesitation. Sarah helped me file the lawsuit for $5,000 to cover the cost of a replacement wheelchair. Once the paperwork was filed, I braced myself for the fallout. The news spread through my family like wildfire. It started when Jack was served with the legal documents. He immediately called me, furious. His voice was shaking with anger as he shouted, "You're really suing me? Are you kidding me? Over a chair?" "It's not just a chair, Jack," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's my independence, and you destroyed it. I can't just sit back and do nothing." Jack refused to listen. He accused me of being dramatic and selfish, saying that I was blowing everything out of proportion. The call ended with him yelling that I'd regret this, and I felt both angry and exhausted. Within hours, I started getting calls from other family members. Some were supportive, telling me I was doing the right thing, while others thought I was overreacting. My mom stood firmly by my side. She was furious with Jack and couldn't believe he had the audacity to call it just a joke. My dad, however, was more conflicted. "David, are you sure this is worth all the family drama?" he asked. I told him I had no choice. It wasn't just about the money, but about principle. Jack's parents, my Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve, were quick to defend him. They called me, practically begging me to drop the lawsuit. "David, you know Jack didn't mean any harm," Aunt Linda said. "Do you really want to ruin the family over this?" I responded as calmly as I could. "Linda, this isn't about ruining the family. Jack caused real damage, and he refuses to take responsibility. If he had just apologized and agreed to pay, none of this would be happening." Their tone quickly shifted from pleading to defensive. "Well, maybe if you weren't so sensitive, this wouldn't be such a big deal," Uncle Steve snapped before hanging up. I sat there in disbelief, feeling like I was being treated as the villain. The divide in my family became even more apparent during a Zoom call that my dad organized in an attempt to smooth things over. From the start, it was chaos. Jack joined with his lawyer, Marcus, who seemed more interested in mocking the situation than resolving it. Jack smirked as he said, "I can't believe we're doing this over a stupid chair. Grow up, David." I couldn't hold back my anger. "You think this is funny? That stupid chair is my lifeline, Jack. You destroyed it, and think you can just laugh it off?" The argument escalated, with family members jumping in on both sides. My mom and my cousin Rachel were the loudest voices of support for me. Rachel, Jack's younger sister, dropped a bombshell that left everyone stunned. "You know Jack borrowed $3,000 from me last year and never paid it back, right?" she said. Jack's face turned red, and he stammered out a denial, but Rachel wasn't having it. "He's been pulling crap like this for years, and everyone just lets him get away with it." Jack's parents immediately jumped to his defense, accusing Rachel and me of ganging up on him. Meanwhile, my mom argued that this was about accountability, not revenge. The call dissolved into shouting, and I eventually logged off, feeling overwhelmed and drained. In the days following the call, the tension in my family only grew. Some relatives started avoiding me altogether, clearly not wanting to take sides. Others sent me messages of support, saying Jack needed to be taught a lesson. My cousin Mike, who I hadn't talked to in months, texted me saying, "Good for you, man. Jack's been a jerk for years, and it's about time someone stood up to him." Despite the mixed reactions, I stayed committed to the lawsuit. Sarah reassured me that we had a strong case, especially after Rachel's revelation about Jack's history of dodging financial obligations. Still, the emotional toll was heavy. Family gatherings would never be the same, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was at the center of a storm I didn't create. I've been trying to focus on the practical side of things, like preparing for court and figuring out how to cover my expenses in the meantime. But the weight of the family drama is always there, pressing down on me. I never wanted it to come to this, but I know I'm doing the right thing by standing up for myself. Jack's actions have consequences, and it's time he learns that. If anyone has advice on navigating family conflicts like this, I'd love to hear it. This whole situation has been a nightmare, and I could really use some perspective. Hey Reddit. I'm back with an update on the lawsuit against my cousin Jack. After he destroyed my $5,000 custom wheelchair and refused to take responsibility, I filed a lawsuit. The trial finally took place, and the entire experience was a roller coaster of emotions. Here's what happened. The day of the trial arrived, and I was filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. My lawyer, Sarah, had prepared everything meticulously, but stepping into the courthouse felt surreal. On one side of the room sat Jack, flanked by his lawyer Marcus and his parents, Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve. Jack looked irritated but oddly confident, as if he thought the entire case was a waste of time. I had my parents with me for support, as well as my cousin Rachel, who had been an incredible ally through all of this. Seeing them there gave me some comfort, but I couldn't shake the nerves. This wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for myself after Jack's reckless behavior left me stranded. The proceedings began with my lawyer presenting the evidence. Sarah outlined the facts clearly, starting with the photos of my damaged wheelchair. She emphasized how essential the wheelchair was to my independence and how Jack's careless actions had left me in a terrible position. Your Honor, this isn't just about a piece of property, Sarah said. This wheelchair is vital to my client's mobility and daily life. The defendant's actions have caused significant hardship, and he must be held accountable. Jack's lawyer tried to downplay everything, portraying the incident as an unfortunate accident. Marcus argued that Jack never intended to cause harm and suggested that the lawsuit was an overreaction. Jack himself took the stand and doubled down, claiming that I was being petty and using this as an excuse to humiliate him. I didn't mean to damage the wheelchair, Jack said, feigning innocence. It was just a joke that went wrong. David knows I wasn't trying to hurt him. His lack of remorse made my blood boil. When Sarah cross-examined him, she wasted no time exposing the cracks in his story. She got him to admit that I had told him repeatedly not to touch my wheelchair and that he ignored me anyway. Sarah also highlighted his refusal to apologize or offer any compensation after the damage was done. When it was Rachel's turn to testify, she didn't hold back. She described Jack's long history of reckless and irresponsible behavior, painting a clear picture of someone who had always avoided accountability. This isn't the first time Jack's actions have caused problems, Rachel said firmly. He's been like this for years, and no one ever holds him accountable. This time, it's different because what he did has real consequences. Rachel even mentioned the money Jack had borrowed from her and never paid back, which seemed to catch his lawyer off guard. Jack looked uncomfortable as Rachel spoke, but he didn't try to deny it. His parents, however, looked furious. The judge listened carefully throughout the proceedings, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. By the end of the day, it felt like the evidence and testimonies were clearly in my favor. Still, I couldn't relax until the ruling was announced. When the judge delivered the verdict, I held my breath. After reviewing the evidence and hearing both sides, it is clear that the defendant acted recklessly and caused significant harm to the plaintiff, the judge said. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to pay $5,000 in damages. Relief washed over me, but it was immediately overshadowed by Jack's reaction. He stood up abruptly and started shouting, "This is ridiculous. Over a stupid chair? This is what you wanted, David? To ruin the family?" The judge called for order, but Jack stormed out of the courtroom, slamming the door behind him. His parents followed quickly, looking embarrassed but still throwing me dirty looks. I sat there, stunned by the outburst. I had won the case, but the victory felt bittersweet. Outside the courthouse, my mom hugged me tightly, telling me how proud she was of me for standing up for myself. Rachel gave me a reassuring smile and said, "You did what needed to be done. Don't let Jack's tantrum get to you." Other family members, however, were less supportive. By the time I got home, I had messages from relatives accusing me of being selfish and tearing the family apart. Jack even posted on social media, calling me out for betraying him and saying I turned a small mistake into a massive issue. Winning the case brought a sense of justice, but it also made the family divide even deeper. Jack's refusal to take responsibility and his public outburst only added fuel to the fire. I'm left wondering how long it will take for things to settle down, or if they ever will. If anyone has advice on dealing with family drama after legal battles, I'd love to hear it. This whole experience has been exhausting, and I'm just trying to find a way forward. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Hey Reddit. I'm back with an update on the mess with my cousin Jack. After the court ruled in my favor and ordered Jack to pay $5,000 for the wheelchair he destroyed, I hoped this would finally be resolved. Unfortunately, it's been anything but smooth. Jack has refused to take responsibility, and his failure to pay has set off a chain reaction of chaos that's dragged the entire family into the drama. After the court decision, I waited for Jack to make the first payment. Weeks passed, and I didn't receive anything. I tried to be patient, telling myself he might need time to gather the money, but as another month went by with no word from him, my frustration grew. I reached out directly, trying to keep the conversation civil despite how angry I felt. Jack, the court ordered you to pay the $5,000. You can't just ignore it, I said firmly. Jack immediately became defensive. Do you think I have that kind of money lying around? I'm already dealing with enough because of this lawsuit. You've had months to prepare, I replied. You could have started with something, anything, but ignoring it won't make it go away. Instead of acknowledging the problem, Jack hung up on me. It was clear he had no intention of paying unless forced to. So I contacted Sarah, my lawyer, to discuss my options. Sarah explained that I could initiate wage garnishment to ensure the payments were made directly from his income. While I hated having to escalate things further, I realized Jack had left me no choice. The legal process to start wage garnishment took a few weeks, and Jack wasn't happy when he found out. He called me, furious, saying I was ruining his life. Why are you doing this to me, David? Isn't winning the lawsuit enough? Now you're taking money out of my paycheck, he shouted. Jack, this is happening because you refuse to pay, I said, keeping my tone steady. You had every opportunity to make this right, but you didn't. This is the consequence of your choices. The conversation ended in another argument, with Jack accusing me of being heartless. Meanwhile, his employer was notified of the garnishment, and the tension seemed to spill over into his work life. Rumors started circulating among family members that Jack was struggling financially, and a few relatives even called me, pressuring me to back off. David, he's your cousin, Aunt Linda said in one particularly uncomfortable call. Can't you just let this go? He's having a hard time. I've been more than patient, I replied. This isn't about being harsh. It's about making sure I can replace something essential to my life. Jack destroyed my wheelchair and then refused to take responsibility. He's not the victim here. Aunt Linda didn't have much to say after that, but the guilt trip was clear. Despite her protests, I stood firm. I wasn't going to let Jack continue to avoid accountability. Jack's situation took a turn for the worse a few months after the wage garnishment started. He lost his job at a marketing firm, though the official reason given was unrelated to the garnishment. From what I heard through family members, Jack's performance at work had been declining, likely due to the stress of his financial troubles. Without a steady paycheck, the payments stopped entirely. His financial problems escalated quickly. Within weeks of losing his job, Jack fell behind on rent, and his car was repossessed. He started borrowing money from anyone who would lend it to him, but even his closest friends began to distance themselves. Rachel, who had been supportive of me throughout this ordeal, called me one night to vent. Jack showed up at my apartment today, asking for money, she said. He looked awful, David. He's drowning in debt, and he's still blaming you for everything. I sighed, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Rachel, I don't know what else to do. He had every chance to avoid this, and he refused. I can't feel guilty for holding him accountable. Rachel agreed, but admitted it was hard to watch Jack spiral. I felt the same way, but I reminded myself that this situation was entirely of Jack's making. The family drama intensified as Jack's financial troubles became impossible to ignore. Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve did their best to support him, but they couldn't cover all his debts. Jack's younger brother, Nick, refused to get involved, saying, "Jack needs to learn to deal with the messes he creates. Bailing him out won't help him in the long run." Jack began avoiding family gatherings, too embarrassed to face everyone. At the same time, he started posting on social media, painting himself as the victim. One particularly infuriating post read, "Some people care more about money than family. Hope you're happy, David." His words sparked a wave of backlash, with some relatives siding with him and others defending me. My mom, always my fiercest supporter, wasn't about to let Jack's narrative go unchallenged. She replied directly to his post, writing, "Jack, this situation is your own doing. David gave you every chance to make it right, and you refused. Take responsibility for your actions." Despite my mom's defense, the division within the family deepened. Some relatives started avoiding me altogether, while others sent private messages to let me know they supported me. It was exhausting trying to navigate the growing rift, especially when all I wanted was to replace my wheelchair and move on. Jack's financial troubles continued to pile up. Without a job, he couldn't make any progress on his debts, and he ended up moving back in with Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve. I heard through the grapevine that creditors were calling him constantly, and he was considering filing for bankruptcy. It was clear that Jack was in over his head, but he still refused to acknowledge that his actions had consequences. Rachel told me that Jack's behavior hadn't changed much despite everything. "He's still acting like the victim," she said during one of our conversations. "He keeps saying this is all your fault, but he won't admit that he's the one who caused it." It was frustrating to hear, but at this point, I wasn't surprised. Jack had always been good at deflecting blame, and this situation was no different. This entire experience has been draining, not just for me but for the whole family. Jack's refusal to take responsibility has caused ripple effects that have hurt everyone around him. While I hate seeing the damage it's caused, I can't ignore the fact that this was his doing. He made the choices that led to this, and it's not my job to fix the mess he created. If anyone's been through a similar situation, I'd appreciate any advice on dealing with the aftermath. It's hard to watch someone spiral, even when you know it's their own fault. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Hey Reddit. I'm back with what I hope will be the final update in this saga. After my cousin Jack destroyed my $5,000 custom wheelchair, refused to pay for it, and made things worse by ignoring the court ruling, I thought the chaos would eventually die down. Instead, it's only gotten worse. The family is now completely divided. Some relatives support me, while others are accusing me of being the one who tore the family apart. Every interaction feels like walking into a minefield, and it's exhausting. It became clear pretty quickly that this wasn't going to blow over. Once Jack's financial struggles worsened and he started losing control of his life, some family members began to shift the narrative. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on Jack's refusal to take responsibility. It was on me for pushing things too far. Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve were the most vocal. They had always stood by Jack, but now their criticisms of me were relentless. One night, Aunt Linda called, and I could tell from the tone of her voice that it wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "David, do you even see what's happening?" she asked, frustration dripping from her words. "Jack has lost his job, his car, and his apartment. He's drowning in debt. Is that what you wanted? To ruin him completely?" "Linda, this isn't about what I wanted," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "This is about Jack refusing to take responsibility for destroying something that's essential to my life. He had every chance to make this right, and he chose not to." Her response was sharp. "You've destroyed the harmony in this family. We used to get along, and now look at us. Was it really worth it?" The accusations didn't stop with Aunt Linda. My cousin Brian, who had been relatively quiet during the earlier stages of this ordeal, decided to weigh in. During a family dinner that I reluctantly attended, Brian made it clear which side he was on. "David, you've really gone too far with this," he said, staring at me across the table. "Jack made a mistake. People make mistakes. But you couldn't let it go, and now look at where we are. The family's a mess." I felt my chest tighten. A mistake? He wrecked my wheelchair and refused to pay for it. I didn't ask for this mess. Jack created it by ignoring every opportunity to make things right. Brian scoffed. "Maybe if you'd handled it differently, we wouldn't all be sitting here on opposite sides." At that point, My mom, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke up. "Brian, don't you dare put this on David. Jack brought this on himself. If he'd taken responsibility from the start, none of this would have happened." The table fell silent, but the tension was palpable. Not everyone was against me, though. My cousin Rachel remained firmly in my corner, and her support was a lifeline. She had seen firsthand how Jack's behavior had spiraled out of control, and she wasn't afraid to call him out. "Jack has always been reckless," Rachel said during one of our many late-night phone calls. "This isn't about you ruining the family. This is about Jack finally facing the consequences of his actions, and some people just don't want to accept that." Her words gave me some comfort, but the family division only deepened over time. The situation reached a breaking point during a family gathering at my parents' house. It was supposed to be a small get-together, but tensions were running high from the moment people arrived. I could feel the icy stares from Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve, while Brian avoided me altogether. Jack, who had decided to show up despite everything, made his feelings known early on. As we all sat down to eat, he muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Glad to see some people are still welcome here after ruining the family." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "Jack, if you have something to say, just say it." "Oh, I think everyone here knows what I mean," he shot back. "You couldn't let it go. You had to drag it out in court, take my money, and destroy my life. All over a stupid chair." Before I could respond, Rachel jumped in. "That stupid chair was David's independence, Jack. You destroyed it, laughed about it, and refused to pay for the damage. Don't act like you're the victim here." The room erupted into chaos. Aunt Linda started shouting at Rachel to mind her own business, while my mom defended me against anyone who dared to criticize my actions. My dad, always the peacemaker, tried to calm everyone down, but it was no use. The argument spiraled out of control, and people started leaving in anger. After that night, the family felt more fractured than ever. Some relatives stopped speaking to me entirely, while others went out of their way to show support. My cousin Nick, who had mostly stayed out of the drama, called me the next day to offer some encouragement. "David, I don't blame you for any of this," he said. "Jack needed a reality check, and it's about time someone held him accountable. If other people can't see that, that's their problem." Despite Nick's reassurance, it was hard not to feel the weight of the division. Family gatherings became impossible to navigate, with separate camps forming and lingering tension in every interaction. Some relatives, like Aunt Linda, openly criticized me whenever they got the chance, while others, like Rachel and Nick, made it clear they had my back. Jack called me unexpectedly one afternoon. Seeing his name flash on my phone brought back a mix of frustration and hesitation, but I answered. His tone surprised me. It was quieter, lacking his usual arrogance. "David, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," he began, "but I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I need to apologize." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I messed up, big time," he admitted. "Not just with the wheelchair, but with how I handled everything after. I ignored your pain, blamed you, and made things worse for both of us. I'm sorry, David. I've been selfish and I want to make things right." Hearing this from Jack felt surreal. His words seemed sincere, but after everything, I couldn't help but feel cautious. Apologies from him often came wrapped in deflection or humor, but this time, he sounded genuinely remorseful. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied carefully, "but words only mean so much. It's actions that matter now." Jack sighed. "I know. I've got a long way to go, but I want to prove to you that I'm serious about making amends." A few days later, Jack showed up at my door, holding a small duffel bag. He looked nervous, an expression I wasn't used to seeing on him. "Can I stay here for a week?" he asked. "Things with my parents are tense right now. I just need some space to figure things out." I hesitated. The idea of having him in my space after all the chaos he'd caused didn't sit well with me. But I could see he was struggling, and part of me wanted to give him a chance. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The first few days were uneventful. Jack seemed to be making an effort to show he was serious about his apology. He offered to help with cooking, cleaned up after himself, and even apologized again during dinner one night. "I know I can't undo what I've done," he said, his voice quieter than usual. But I'm trying to figure out how to move forward and fix what I've broken. Not just with you, but with the family too. I nodded, acknowledging his effort, though part of me remained guarded. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt in a few days. By the middle of the week, however, cracks started to show. One evening while we were watching TV, Jack made a joke about the lawsuit. "Hey, at least I learned not to mess with expensive chairs," he said, laughing nervously. I turned to him, unamused. "Jack, that's not funny." His face fell. "Sorry," he mumbled. "I was just trying to lighten the mood." It wasn't the first time he'd slipped back into his old habits that week. Another time, while we were talking about family dynamics, he quipped, "Well, now I'm not the only one who's got everyone mad at them. You've got half the family on your case too." The comment stung. "Jack, do you realize how much this has cost me? Not just financially, but emotionally? You're not the only one dealing with fallout here," I said, barely containing my frustration. He sighed. "I know. I just don't always know how to express myself without joking." His admission felt genuine, but it didn't make his remarks any easier to stomach. By the end of the week, it was clear that while he was trying, the damage to our relationship was too deep to repair in such a short time. When the week was over, Jack packed his bag and thanked me for letting him stay. "I know it's going to take time, but I hope you'll give me a chance to keep proving I'm serious," he said before leaving. I nodded, but inside, I wasn't sure what the future held for our relationship. Trust was shattered, and while I appreciated his efforts, rebuilding it felt like a distant goal. For now, all I could do was focus on moving forward, with or without Jack in my life. After everything that happened with my cousin Jack, life eventually began to stabilize. The damage he caused, both to my wheelchair and to our family, had left a lasting impact, but I knew I couldn't let it define me. Over the following months, I focused on reclaiming my independence and finding ways to move forward, even if some relationships remained fractured. It took time, but I finally saved enough to purchase a new wheelchair. This one cost $7,500, significantly more than the last, but it was worth every penny. It had cutting-edge features, improved ergonomic support, and a sleek design that made mobility easier and more comfortable. When it was delivered, I felt a wave of pride. The chair wasn't just about getting from place to place. It symbolized resilience and a fresh start. Adjusting to my new chair gave me a renewed sense of freedom. I realized how much I had let the conflict with Jack weigh me down, and I wanted to channel that energy into something positive. I had always been interested in photography, but I'd never taken it seriously. With my new mobility, I started going to parks and cityscapes, capturing moments through the lens of my camera. On one of my photography trips to a local park, I met Carla, a young woman in her late 20s who was also in a wheelchair. She was snapping photos of a sunset with a much more advanced camera than mine. We struck up a conversation, and she encouraged me to join a local photography group. Carla had been paralyzed since birth and had a fiercely independent spirit that inspired me. She introduced me to a network of people with disabilities who shared tips, support, and encouragement for living fully. Through this community, I began volunteering to mentor others with mobility challenges. I found that sharing my story helped me heal, and hearing others' struggles and triumphs reminded me that I wasn't alone. One of the most rewarding experiences was helping a teenager named Malik, who was adjusting to life in a wheelchair after a spinal injury. Malik reminded me so much of myself, angry at the world, frustrated with the limitations, but brimming with potential. Teaching him to embrace his independence felt like paying forward the help I'd received over the years. My photography blossomed as well. Over time, I upgraded my equipment, practiced techniques, and began building an online portfolio. Sharing my photos on social media brought unexpected attention. I started gaining followers, many of whom were drawn to the mix of landscapes, urban scenes, and personal stories about overcoming adversity. One day, I posted a photo of my new wheelchair with a caption about resilience and moving forward. The post went viral, with thousands of likes and comments from people who resonated with the message. Amid this personal growth, Jack reached out again. Over the months, he had been slowly paying off his debt. At first, the payments were inconsistent, but after securing a new job at a warehouse, he began paying more regularly. Finally, he made the last payment, Instead of mailing a check or transferring the money, he showed up at my door with an envelope in hand. "I wanted to give this to you in person," he said, looking nervous. "It's the last payment. I know it doesn't make up for everything I did, but I hope it's a step in the right direction." I took the envelope and thanked him. He lingered on the porch, clearly wanting to say more. "David, I've been thinking a lot about how much I screwed up," he continued. "Not just with the wheelchair, but with how I handled everything after. I blamed you. I avoided responsibility, and I made things worse. I'm sorry, truly sorry." His words sounded genuine, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that he had actually changed. "I appreciate the apology, Jack," I said, "but rebuilding trust takes time. It's not something that happens overnight." "I get that," he said. "I'm just grateful you're willing to even talk to me." As much as I wanted to forgive Jack completely, the wounds from our past were still fresh. But his efforts, both with the payments and his apology, showed me he was at least trying.